Is an expert who has been on the National Joint Terrorism Task Force. Steve Rogers is a former U.S. Naval Intelligence officer, and it's good to have you with us. Thanks for coming in. Let me begin. Are we more vulnerable now than we were on September 11th, 2001?
Well, let me put it in these terms. I really believe that we are well protected and well prepared. Now, to answer the question, are we more vulnerable, we're at a new level of this war. It's a war now against an army, let alone calling it a terrorist group. ISIS is very well financed, something we've never seen before. Al-Qaeda, we used to be at war with, now it's ISIS. But the difference between the two, Marvin, is ISIS is well organized, well trained, and well financed.
And they have a great propaganda tool. They have all the finances for highly and well produced propaganda films such as this one, The Flames of War, which we've seen on YouTube.
Which Al-Qaeda didn't have. And how did they get all this money? Well, when the ISIS troops went into Mosul, for example, it was probably the most notorious bank robbery in history. We're talking about close to $400 million. They've got money coming in from the sale of oil, and in order to shore up their recruitment, they're using money to do that, as you just said, through the social media.
$3 to $6 million a day being brought in by the oil, which they're selling on the black market.
And think about the weapons that they buy from those resources.
Not only buy, what about the weapons that we left behind in Iraq?
Well, that's right. And what happened yesterday? There were Iraqi troops who believed that those tanks and armored personnel carriers were actually friendly weapons that were left there, but they ended up being those ISIS troops. And what did the ISIS troops do? They used chemical weapons against these Iraqi troops.
Let's talk more about that a little later. Let's talk about our state of preparedness.
Okay.
We've learned so much. We've learned lessons from past experience, haven't we not? Particularly from 9/11.
Yes, we have. And you could attribute the safety of this country and the fact that we haven't been attacked to the hard work of the FBI, the CIA, and all of our local police departments nationwide.
Now, ISIS, Jerry Hauer, the Commissioner of Homeland Security in New York, said that he felt that Al-Qaeda was still a greater threat than ISIS. Do you feel that?
Well, I'll tell you, I wouldn't go so far as to say they're a greater threat, because ISIS is the organization that is well financed. Al-Qaeda doesn't have the resources, at least in my opinion, that ISIS has. You got to remember, ISIS has all the money. ISIS now has all the weapons. And remember what ISIS said just a few weeks ago. We will come to Washington and we will plant our flag over the White House. You never heard that from Al-Qaeda. So in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and the intelligence information, at least that's out there as open source information, I wouldn't go so far as to say Al-Qaeda is the greater threat.
But Police Commissioner Bratton, I sat down with him last week. He felt that Al-Qaeda was still a greater threat because their explicit mission is to destroy us. ISIS would like that also, but right now their focus is forming their own caliphate in Iraq.
Well, yes, it is, but ISIS also is going out recruiting people from all over the world, and let's talk about the United States, the homegrown lone wolf terrorists. That's where a lot of that money is going to go to. Instead of sending people here, they'll recruit them here, maybe train them here, and then let them execute their plans right here at home.
Let's explore that further in a moment. First, let's point out, last Wednesday, the president was in town, and he took his case for global support to the UN. And he called for a coalition that he said would train and equip troops to fight the Islamic extremists known as ISIS, and to cut off its financial resources and to halt the flow of foreign recruits to its ranks. Here's part of what the president had to say.
No God condones this terror. No grievance justifies these actions. There can be no reasoning, no negotiation with this brand of evil. The only language understood by killers like this is the language of force. So the United States of America will work with a broad coalition to dismantle this network of death.
And at the outset, he was not too successful in getting that coalition, but now he's got about 50 allies joining us in these raids.
If it is a true coalition, Marvin, Iraq has 250,000 troops. Where are they? The Turkish border, the Turkish government, hundreds of thousands of troops. Where are they? Saudi Arabia, they have troops. Where are they? I think the concern of the American people is that, are we going to shed more American blood on their soil? I don't think it's necessary. They have the manpower. They have the troops. We could certainly lend them our air power. And so I think when we talk about a coalition, a true coalition, are those nations willing to shed some blood for their land? And I think that's where where we're going to have
What we saw in the outset in Iraq was not very promising. When ISIS moved in, the Iraqi soldiers, they fled. The Kurds came in and they picked up the support there.
Yes, and therein lies one of the problems as to why this may be happening. We left Iraq too soon. Look, the Joint Chiefs, the State Department, we all agree that we left too soon. ISIS was waiting in the wings, all right? They knew, those terrorist groups knew once we left what they were going to do. Look, this wasn't an overnight invasion. This was a well-planned and well-executed invasion. You're right, Marvin. The Iraqi army, they took up their stakes and they ran. But you know what? It's their homeland now. All right? We could do some of the training, but we could also invite Turkey, who will be threatened by ISIS, Saudi Arabia, that regime's going to be threatened. Interesting that only Iran is saying, look, we'll come in to help you guys out, because they have a great stake at this.
That is interesting that Iran has come in. Our arch enemy, Iran, with their nuclear development, now coming in to become one of our allies. Well, Iraq at one point, under Saddam Hussein, was our ally.
Exactly right. It's a strange set of things going on there, which I know we're going to talk about Syria. You talk about a problem we have and whose side we're going to be on in Syria.
Now, we're talking about the Iraqi troops. The last time I was in Iraq a couple of years ago, I had a top U.S. general tell me on the record, oh, yeah, the Iraqi army, they're ready to take over their own security. But off the record, he was very skeptical. And what we saw, what happened there, when they were confronted, they ran.
Well, it's obvious, yes. They were confronted and ran. They were overwhelmed by a massive, massive invasion. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of ISIS troops. And what happened yesterday was a tragedy. Here at the Iraqis, I think there were 100 to 300 Iraqi soldiers begging, yelling for help. We need support. Nobody came, and this was the first time we've seen chemical weapons used in this war.
What about at the outset? I mean, President Obama's under criticism for not acting earlier and arming the moderate rebels in Syria that might have halted ISIS from gaining the strength it has.
Well, look, I think he was using a lot of caution, because we have a habit sometimes of getting involved in the wrong side of a war. I think the United States government, needed enough intelligence information to at least ensure to a great degree that we weren't going to arm our future enemy. And so I think that was all about. Obviously, they're comfortable now to do this.
Okay, a lot more to talk about. Let's talk particularly about those homegrown terrorists and the lone wolf being a big threat to the United States. We'll explore that and much more with Stephen Rogers, former member of the National Joint Terrorism Task Force, when PIX 11 News Close-Up continues.